you.
It's exciting to get to talk to you about your work and the process behind your work and how your collective came together. I believe your images are so beautiful, and they remain like the most popular thing we showed so far on the Artsy platform. So we got to translate this into sales. So I want to make sure that you can support your studio in the future as well. So let's start out by doing an introduction, because you're known as DanaidX as the collective, but introduce yourselves individually.
Yeah, so I'm Angela.
And I'm Hope.
And actually, we kind of almost think of DanaidX as a collective identity because it's not a collaboration. I mean, it's a little bit different than how other artists collaborate, because we say that together we form one artist.
Well, right, okay. Because like with like a lot of collaborations, right? It's either there's work being handed off where like one person will do a bid and then hand it off, someone else will do another work, or you'll work separately and then bring work together, or something like of that nature, right? Whereas, or you have different tasks within the work, right? Whereas like we kind of actually work together as like one unit throughout, like body doubling through every stage of our process.
And we actually chose our whole process because it could be collaborative, because we wanted to do the whole thing together, or needed to, really. It kind of came out of necessity. So we designed our whole process to require both of us. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And sometimes in collaborations there are like disagreements or ideals that go in different directions. How do you guys address that?
I guess figured that out when it happened.
Yeah, it just happened. I don't know. We started off as really close friends, and again, we built the whole practice around working together. So I don't think we came in with.
It's not like I had my art practice and I'm trying to bring my things in. It's like we built it together, like to fit us.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, we're still building it. So to be honest, I feel like the creative process hasn't led to a lot of tension. Rather, I feel like when we have differing views, it's an enrichment.
Oh yeah.
Where even today we came down, so we've been talking about a certain piece we were going to start working on, and we realized we had different ideas of it in our heads. But as we talked it through, that conflict, I feel like ended up actually leading to a richer,
better than what either of us had actually in our heads on our own. Like I was like, oh wait, you meant it this way, I meant it this way, but like we came to something else that was even better.
Yeah, as we talked through it. And that's usually what happens. I would say the greater tension, honestly, comes from working through maybe more logistical things that stress us out. And then that's harder, because we're both stressed out, and our way of dealing with that might be slightly different. But even then, we have such a close friendship that we're kind of used to working that kind of thing out anyways. So yeah.
That's good. I was just trying to stir up a little drama to, get the listeners like overly invested in the outcomes, but that's fine. We don't need drama.
Sorry, everything's happy.
Everything's happy.
But we do, I feel like our subject matter is dramatic, where we pick pretty ideas.
We have lots of melodrama.
Yeah. And that's what's funny. I feel like we balance each other out in a lot of ways in our partnership, where Hope, I would say, is better technically a lot of times, and I'm the one that often I don't know, comes up with like the beginning of an idea type of thing. But yeah, I feel like with the work that we're doing,
let's talk about, that's all right. Let's talk about Goddess Myths and Monsters, because they're quite stunning images. And let's talk about the context behind them. Like what is the message that you're forming with your images? What do you hope that your audience gets from the images?
Yeah, so I would say it started from our personal experiences of going through pregnancy, for Hope going through transition as a trans woman. And we had the idea of comparing those two experiences, because in a lot of ways, the cultural narratives behind people's reactions to those experiences are coming from a similar place. And also they're similar in that both experiences are pretty visible, right? Your body's changing really rapidly, and it's a really vulnerable time that is really visible, right? It's hard to put words around, because it is something that has so much weight to it. But a lot of what we explore has to do with cultural ideas around idealized womanhood, and how that leads to like visceral reactions, right? So there is this kind of cultural idealized woman, which is the person who either can become a mother or who is a mother, and it's like mother in this more idealized way, right? But that's contrasted with the monstrous woman who either can't become a mother or who somehow failed, right? The
Right.
failed mother. And I think that what we're exploring is really the misogyny that's behind those narratives, the way that misogyny views women through that lens of their ability to bear children and their existential capacity for care, you know?
Right.
But also there's a lot of cultures that have these different tropes that we work with.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think like even the title like Goddesses, Myths, and Monsters came for us out of a conversation that we were having about misogyny years ago when you had been reading like some fantasy novel where was talking about like hags as a villain, right? And we started talking about how so often when women are villainized, they're turned into some sort of a monstrous or succubus, like it's like one of these like extreme like monster forms. Whereas when men are villainized, so often it's the anti-hero that you need to like want to empathize with and understand why you went through all this, right? Um, and just kind of seeing that like so often the misogyny that we've experienced that we carry in our bodies and are dealing with maps so cleanly onto that trope of like the maiden, the matron, and the crone. Or in our case, we switched out for hags, like emphasize the monstrousness of it because it's all kind of like either can you bear the child, can you take care of the child, or did you fail at that task, right? Which is then that contrasting monstrousness.
Yeah, and even with the trans experience, right? There's so many people who respond in this visceral way to trans women and don't even understand why they're responding that way. But I think there's this contradiction to the cultural narrative, right? That's happening in the trans experience, where you have somebody who's not physically capable of bearing children, who in no way fits in that trope of like the idealized mother. And there's this reaction, this feeling of almost like then there's a trampling of that sacred motherhood, right? Oh, this is a
Yeah.
threat to that sacred motherhood that's being held so precious.
Right, because it's not just enough to like slot in as the hag, but even more so to like because it takes away from the other of like trying to claim that place.
Right.
Yeah, and
Isn't it interesting? It's interesting to me how people act like something is being stolen from them themselves personally. Like you walked into their house, took their 80-inch television set from the wall, and then walked out the door, and that's why they're upset or something. And you're just like, what does my identity and the way that I live my life have to do with you? You know, like how
interesting
is
because
that affecting you?
yeah, people respond that way even to women who choose to not have children,
Mhm.
right? But I think even more so to trans women, whether they have children or not, right? Like, and I think what's been interesting for us is realizing how even maybe up here, like in our headspace, in things we've talked through, we are anti-misogyny, anti these ideas, want to feel free, but then within our own bodies,
Still carry that internalized misogyny.
there's this internalized misogyny.
Right.
So yeah, so a lot of this project for us is working through those things that are so delicate and nuanced and well, like you said earlier, personal and vulnerable, but at the same time, kind of universal. But we also recognize that like there's so much intersectionality that like it goes on with these stories, and we can only see our little facets of it, which is why like dealing with it through images has been really cathartic for both of us, I think.
I
Yeah,
can imagine that would be true. I mean, art in itself is very therapeutic, but in order to even working individually, in order to translate something that you want to say to the world, or you want to unearth or organize in your own mind, the process of actually creating a piece actually changes the way that you think about that. And then when you put it up on a wall and you ask people to view it, you end up speaking in a way about it that you didn't even know that you felt about it, because it may be the first time that you're verbalizing it outside of yourself.
Mhm.
How was your work accepted in shows that you've been presenting in? Because this is a relatively new project for you, and in terms of exhibitions, it's a relatively new exhibition project.
yeah, so we are in one other show that's opening soon that explores motherhood. That's opening in Chicago at Women Made Gallery.
Oh, I
Um,
love Women Made. I worked at Women Made when I was in college at the Art Institute.
oh,
Like
very
this
cool.
was like I'm like 20, maybe 30 years ago. Yeah, maybe 30 years ago.
Yeah, our previous body of work explored the experience of being chronically ill, because that's actually how
First
we
bonded.
first bonded.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that work was in a show of theirs this past summer, and so we found out
Mhm.
about them. But yeah, I'm excited for that. And then we're preparing for an in-person show December 2025 here in Baltimore.
Right. So this is only like the first half of that body of work. And primarily the images that we have now are from more of the like cis mother side and less of the stuff from the trans stuff. Most of that's still in
Yeah, we
process
would
for
say it's
that show.
about what you have now on the artsy show is probably about half of what ultimately is going to be in this body of work. And we're excited to have a in-person show as well, because on the theme of misogyny and it being embedded in our bodies,
Yeah.
we're going to do an installation where we get a bunch of invasive vines and invasive bugs, the spotted lanternflies that are everywhere here on the East Coast. And we're going to fill that in the gallery as an installation, kind of as a metaphor of misogyny and how, you know, these ideas and these narratives, you know, filter in, and unless you're fighting against them, it's like the invasive vines here in Maryland, unless you're actively ripping them out regularly, they're going to fill up your yard. And if your neighbor's not fighting them, then they're going to be harder to fight in your yard. And I think misogyny is really similar.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the images that we have on Artsy and this ideal of motherhood. And these are pretty dramatic images. I mean, they're in some ways it feels. I get the sense of like, in some ways, femininity is erased from some of the images. So, like by removing nipples from the breast, that is an identifier of femininity. But in the image, you don't see the nipples, and I think that might be a part of the process that you're working with. But also, it's a very dramatic statement. And then you have like apron strings is one of my favorites. I mean, that image to me is like I love it. It's so dramatic in the way you play with the scale of that. So I'm curious about like perspectives on motherhood and how that played into this.
So I think the lack of nipples came from our inspiration of actually looking at some of these ancient goddess figures, right? And if you look at those ancient kind of sculptural forms, a lot of them don't have the nipples.
It's just, yeah, it's reduced down to like the shapes and yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And so that was some of our inspiration there. For yeah, I feel like apron strings has been a cathartic image for me. And you were just talking, Hope,
Yeah,
this
for
week
both of
about
us.
how
Yeah.
it's been resonating with you in your own parenting. But yeah, I do. I feel like especially because parenting is so individualistic, right, in this culture, there there can oftentimes feel like there's this enormous weight that yeah, it's and
like as soon as you become a mother, you have to sacrifice everything and give up everything for this, and it is like it becomes your like this whole narrative around like the responsibility and the role and the weight of that.
yeah,
Right.
something that we talk a lot about with regard to our work is limitations, and how in our culture so oftentimes we want to see limits as something that need to be overcome, but actually as humans, to be limited is to be human, you know. And I think for reclaiming, I feel like there's this kind of going along with this idealized mother, there's this idea that somehow mothers shouldn't have limits and that that's a good thing, that they can be these superheroes and we just laud them for it, right? And that's ridiculous. Like, you don't thrive as a human being if you're not allowed to have the limits that you have. We're all bodies. And the more you try to push past your limits, the less, like, how we experience joy and love and vulnerability and connection is through our bodies. And the more our bodies are pushed past their limits, the less we're able to be in a place of thriving and connection and well-being. And so a lot of that piece, I feel like, was just laughing. We're just laughing at the ridiculousness of what the expectation is. And you know,
I think the whole way from the very first conception, we're like, what if we made an apron into a cape, all the way into like its final thing? We just thought it was like silly and ridiculous. We never be anything until like the final version came out. Like, whoa.
Yeah, it was like part of it was like playing with it, right? Like, let's just do this. And my partner will walk in on our photo shoots and literally just laugh. Like,
Oh dear. I'll be out here. I'll be out here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to have the opportunity to work with you, and also to bring your work to Mexico City as well. I mean, right now it's in San Diego as part of the Photografia show, and then we're going to have it in Mexico City as well. So for me, it's really exciting to bring this unique visual aspect of your work and the stories that you're telling. I honestly had not, run across any work like this before, and it's just gorgeous, like absolutely gorgeous images. Like kudos to you both for finding someone to work with and thriving in that, and really like growing inside of that. It's amazing. I'm very disappointed not to get any drama. So we're gonna cancel this interview right now, and we're gonna start all over again. And I want you to work up some drama. We gotta
well, we have dealing with shipping might be the closest thing we've had.
Oh yes, yeah, shipping. Oh well, yeah, that alone that would drive a wedge in any relationship. I think shipping is a pain in the butt. I can't believe it. It's 2025 and we haven't come up with a better way to do these things.
No.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about your work, and I'm excited to. We invite people to go to San Diego to the Studio Door to see your work, and then in Mexico City on February 1st at Centro Cultural Juan Rufo, and then Clavo Movimiento Art Fair for Art Week Mexico City. So you're going to be all over the place in Mexico City for Art Week, and I really hope that it equals great fame and sales for you both.
Well, thank you so much. We're really excited to be part of the work that you're doing.
Yes,
and
so much.
Yeah.
And I'll get to meet you if in Baltimore in September when I do the show with Maryland Art Place in September. So that would be cool too. So
That would be awesome. Look forward to it.
We'll stop the recording.